Okay, cool.
All right. If everything's good on your end, audio wise, we
No,
will
go ahead.
we'll
Go ahead. I'll put the
Okay.
microphone here and away we go.
Okay. All right. So, you've written this introductory text to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. How would you describe yourself professionally, and how did you become interested in this conflict?
I guess professionally, I would describe myself as, I guess the term is independent scholar.
Mm.
I guess that's what we call that's a term we use. It's not really one that I use, but that is the term. When I do my work, I teach at three different, two universities and a college. But I don't work in association with them, so I claim the title of independent. What got me interested in these topics initially was a frustration with my own ignorance, and then I just immersed myself in the historical literature on the topic, and I was immediately taken with how wrong everybody was, and how uncomplicated this particular conflict was, the Palestine-Israel conflict. I was like, wow, this isn't hard at all. And I've been told the opposite for years, like, oh, you'll never figure it out. They've been fighting for thousands of years. This is biblical. This goes back, so-and-so's ancestors killed so-and-so's ancestors 1,000 years ago. No, it's not even close. This is a modern conflict. It can be summarized very quickly. We can have a debate. We can have a discussion as to when you want to start the clock. When you think it started. Historians will maybe disagree about when we can call it the Palestine-Israel conflict. Did it start in the 1920s? Did it start in the 1930s? Did it start in the 1940s? I would say it started in the 1960s. So this conflict, where people have been fighting for thousands of years, it goes back about as far as the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album. That's about how old this conflict is. If we start the clock where I started in the 60s, yes, tensions were building in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, no doubt. But the conflict as it exists today, I would start the clock at 1967.
With the 6-Day War.
Yeah, with the 6-Day War. Yeah, that's
why then, and not with the partition in the late 40s.
I would say I would start it at the 6-Day War because that's when Israel occupied the remaining 22% of Palestine, and that is the principal grievance of the Palestinian people is the occupation. There are Israeli tanks on Palestinian streets, and people are a little touchy about foreign tanks on their streets. For evidence, see all of world history. They don't like foreign armies on their turf. They just don't like it. Why should they? So that's when Israel took control of the West Bank of Gaza and East Jerusalem, and that is the thing that is, like I said, that is the principal grievance of the Palestinians, and that is the thing that is standing in the way of a Palestinian state.
Okay. Do you let's fast forward to the current conflict. I'm embarrassingly ill-informed about this conflict and the purposes of our article. I think we're going to try to dig into a little history, but I've spoken with some people who are members of a local synagogue, and also some members of a local mosque, Jews and Palestinians. And the one thing, and this will come as no surprise to you, is how differently they view this conflict. And so I don't sort of want to adjudicate history here. I mean, we can get into some of that, but I do want to get your take on, and you know, feel free to draw in history as needed here, but I want to get your take on the current conflict. I want to start with a simple question. Why did Hamas attack on October 7th?
I mean, we can get specific and say that one of the motivating factors was the fact that the Palestinians have been sort of edged out of the diplomatic scene. So the Americans are trying to, work out deals between Arab states and Israel. They did it under Trump. They're still doing it under Biden. There seems to be a new style, as it were, a new approach to the diplomacy, to regional diplomacy. And the Palestinians are like, wait a minute. You can't just pretend we're not here, So I think that was a motivating factor in the attacks on October 7th. However, there's a bigger picture, and that is Hamas is a resistance movement. It's an organization, and it's also an ideology. So what are they resisting against? Well, they're resisting against this occupation that started in 1967.
Okay, let's pause there for a second, because some people I've spoken with will claim, well, Israel withdrew in 2005, the occupation ended, and all the miseries of Gaza fall on the shoulders of Hamas. What do you say to that?
Well, you can pretend that, and people believe all kinds of bizarre things, and that's an example. Israel did disengage, is the term, from Gaza in 2005. That is absolutely true. But Israel controls the coastline, the airspace, the electrical grid. They have repeatedly bombed infrastructure that delivers electricity and fuel and so on. I mean, the Gaza Strip is a humanitarian catastrophe, and that's Israel's fault, because Israel occupies it from the outside.
Now
they're just no longer on the interior, but they absolutely control that territory, and they control it with a grip around its throat.
Do you think that the view you just expressed puts you in the minority of opinions about that? Like, do you have a lot of company in saying that?
It's hard to say. I don't know. I mean, the vast majority of Americans would like to see a ceasefire. I mean, I think there is increasing sympathy toward the Gaza Strip, and as Israel murders, they've killed upwards of 15,000 people, a large chunk of whom were children. I mean, I think people are, I think the mood is souring, and I think approval of Israel is declining, and sympathy with the Gaza Strip. If Americans saw what Israel has been doing in the West Bank, in Gaza, if they really saw what was going on there, there'd be no conflict. The United States would not support what's going on, and there'd be no conflict, because the American people wouldn't stand for it. I've seen it up close and personal. I've been there multiple times. I've seen it with my own eyes. So when people tell me that Israel doesn't occupy the Gaza Strip, well, my response is, well, you should go there.
When did you visit?
Go there and talk to some people and see how they live.
When did you visit?
I was there. I was in Gaza during the second Intifada. I've tried to get in multiple times, but I've had no luck since. I tried to get in 05 and 06, and now you need a military. I just waltzed in 2002, but now you need what's called a military coordination. So you need the military's permission to enter the Strip, and it's like, if you're an independent like me, good luck,
Right.
If you're from CNN, I suppose you can go in, you know. But
Mhm.
now with foreign journalists, you need to submit again, even if you are from CNN or the Wall Street Journal or wherever. You need to coordinate with the military, and they need to sign off on everything that you do
Mm.
because
Oh, so
they want to control the narrative.
you visited before the disengagement and the,
Yes.
I guess, ramping up of the blockade. Was there a blockade before the disengagement? So in any
Not
case,
as such,
yeah.
not as we understand that term now. Yeah.
Okay. The point I'm making there is that you visited even before things seemed to get really bad. You know, the disengagement, the blockade,
And they
cast
were,
land,
and
and then
they, and they were bad.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, okay. How would you describe Israel's actions right now? Some people use the term genocide. Um, some people think that that's just an insult to the real genocides of history. What do you make of the
I
current?
would call it murderous. I would call it in contravention of international law. I mean, they're killing civilians. They can use whatever antiseptic language they want. They talk about humanitarian corridors and precision methods and all this language, but there's 15,000 dead people, and there's, you know, well over 5,000 dead children. I don't. I mean, what adjective should we use? You know,
Mm,
if you murder 5,000 children, you know, I don't know what the appropriate adjective is. I probably wouldn't call it genocide, but um, I think the term ethnic cleansing is probably appropriate because they'd like to see everyone in Gaza just disappear, you know, just march into the Sinai Peninsula or wherever, you know. That's ethnic cleansing. I mean, you're cleansing an area of a people, you know.
mhm,
But what they're doing is murderous. What they're doing is in contravention of international law. And but the United States will not allow Israel to be, you know, held to account or punished by the UN Security Council. That's the White House's job. That's the State Department's job, is to provide diplomatic cover for Israel, so it can do whatever it wants. It can murder however many people it wants, and they've got a protector on the UN Security Council. They've got a permanent seat, and the United States has a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, and
mm.
those you know those votes count, and those vetoes are absolute, and Israel can do whatever it wants, you know, and it knows it. It's not a secret, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This is a bit outside the scope of this article, but what sort of pressure could the UN bring to bear if, say, the United States tomorrow said, "Okay, we're not going to tolerate this anymore"?
Well, if the United States got behind it in the Security Council, they could bring this to a grinding halt.
Mhm.
They could, you know, I mean, the prime minister, certain heads of military could be arrested for war crimes. I mean, they could be tried for war crimes. They could be brought in front of a tribunal, you know. Sanctions, you name it. I mean, there's any number of techniques that could be brought to bear against Israel if the United States and the Security Council were to get behind such measures. Yeah, sure.
Do you think even threatening to withhold military aid could achieve that same objective?
All the American president has to do is bring his fist down on the Resolute desk, and that's all Israel needs to. That's all that's required.
Hmm.
I mean, the United States is influencing events behind the scenes, no doubt, and they speak quietly. They need only whisper, like we'd like to see this, we wouldn't like to see this. That's all they have to say. Israel, the message is received loud and clear. They don't have to say much.
What do you make of the claim that Israel is acting in self-defense?
I don't think it's a legitimate claim. I don't think an occupier can claim self-defense.
Hmm.
How can you occupy millions of people and claim self-defense? That's why Israel has a security problem. That's why it has security concerns, is because of the occupation. Israel knows full well what it has to do
Okay.
to legitimately to address its security concerns. All it has to do is discontinue the occupation, move the wall in the West Bank onto its property, and work toward a Palestinian state. That's what it works the same all over the world. You know, the reason that Israel has security concerns is because of Israel's behavior. Israel is occupying the Palestinians, and that's why. If you make a large number of people desperate, a small number of people will respond violently.
Mhm.
That's the nature of terrorism. It works the same way everywhere. This is not a mystery. There are now a list of former elites in the Israeli intelligence community, former high-ranking, very high-ranking, some of them generals from the Israeli military, and they all say the same thing. The occupation is bad for Israel.
Hmm.
They all say it. It's when they retire, but they all say it. These are high-ranking officials, high-ranking elites from the intelligence community and the military, all saying the same thing. There's even a documentary about it. I mean, these guys are all saying the same thing.
How much blame?
They're saying what I'm saying.
Mhm. How much blame do you put on Hamas? I mean, many people will point to Hamas's charter and say, Hamas is dedicated to the destruction of Israel and all Jews, and that's why we're in this predicament. Israel can't live with neighbors like that. Regardless of what Israel does, Hamas is going to be committed to their destruction. What do you make of that argument?
That is a fanciful argument, because the argument suggests that Hamas just woke up one morning and decided we want to murder Jews. You know, that's which is ridiculous. There's a lot of comparisons of Hamas to the Nazis. I see all the memes and stuff on Threads and Twitter and whatever. It's just a joke. Pick up a book. Study some history. I mean, that the like I said, the reason that Hamas exists is the occupation. No occupation, no Hamas.
Mm.
That's why Hamas exists. Hamas didn't just wake up one morning and decide, oh, we're an anti-Semitic organization, we're going to kill Jews. This is ludicrous. Hamas is a resistance movement, and it's resisting against the occupation. That's the problem, and that is the underlying factor that explains Israel's security concerns. That's not my opinion. That is the opinion of, like I said, a very long list of intelligence elites and high-ranking military officials. That's not my opinion. These are Jewish people. These are Israeli citizens, and they are high-ranking elites in the intelligence community and in the military. Now, are they anti-Semitic? No.
Mm.
Are they anti-Israeli? Hardly. Well, they're saying the same thing I'm saying.
You described Hamas as a resistance movement. Do you think
Yeah.
that the October 7th attack was justified?
Was it justified? No, I don't agree with Hamas's tactics. I don't agree with taking civilians hostage and murdering innocent people. No, I don't agree with anything that Hamas is up to lately. But but at the same time, I'm not surprised. And
Mm.
let's look very closely at a statement made by a former Israeli Prime Minister, Ehud Barak. He did an interview in the United States. I can't remember what the news organization was. I wanted to say it's CNN, but I don't think it was CNN. Did it years ago. He said something very interesting. Now, this is a former Israeli prime minister. He said, if I were a young Palestinian, chances are I would join a terrorist organization. Now that tells you a whole lot. Now, why would he say that? Now, he eventually tried to walk that back, but it was too late. He said it. I think he realized he let too much out of the bag, and he's like, oh boy, he tried to walk it back and tried to cover it up, but it was too late. He said it. Now, why would he say that? Because he knows the facts. How does he know the facts? Because he helped author the facts. He knows what kind of misery it is to live in the Palestinian territories. He knows. Of course he knows. He helped create that reality. He understands what the other intelligence and military elites understand. That when you do what you're doing, you can expect things like October 7th. So while I don't agree with it, I'm not surprised by it. Why would you be surprised by it?
How much responsibility does Hamas bear for the miserable conditions in Gaza?
They don't bear any. They're not conducting an occupation. They're in charge of it because they were.
So I can imagine some people saying, much of the economy is propped up on foreign aid. They siphon the foreign aid to build terror tunnels and rockets and that sort of thing.
That's another aspect that's unsurprising. I mean, the unemployment in Gaza is above 50%. Why is that? Because of the occupation. The economy in Gaza is destroyed. Why is that? The occupation. Israel maintains, the Gaza has been compared to an open air prison. Israel wants its hostages freed. Well, Palestine wants its hostages freed. They're called Gazans. That's an open air prison. I've been there. It's not the way I'd want to live my life. It could be beautiful. I think it is beautiful. Now a lot of it's rubble, but when I was there long ago, I found it to be rather beautiful. It could be a tourist destination for Europeans or something, It could really be something special. The reason it's in the state that it's in is because Israel maintains a chokehold on the Gazan on that territory, and every few years it pulverizes it with planes it got from the United States. Those F-16s were made in the United States. They weren't made in Israel.
I spoke to one person who said that Israel is doing everything in its power to limit civilian casualties. On the other end of that spectrum are people who claim that not only does Israel bomb indiscriminately, that is actually sort of enshrined in policy. Have you heard of the Dahia Doctrine?
What?
The Dahia Doctrine.
I don't know this.
So this is Israel suffered 2 humiliating defeats against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And in the second defeat, toward the end of the war, they bombed this neighborhood in southern Beirut called Dahia. And after that war, they decided that, if anybody messes with us in the future, we're just going to sort of use all measures and just try to increase our deterrence capacity, that sort of thing. Have you heard this kind of line of argument?
I've heard that line of argument. Sure.
Yeah.
If you're talking about killing civilians, well, that's illegal. That's against international law. The assertion that Israel's doing everything in its power it just killed 15,000 people. Does that count? It just killed over 5,000 children. Does that count? Are these, would we say these are precision methods when the body count? The recent temporary ceasefire ran out today. They killed 100 people like before lunch. So if there are precision methods, I don't see them. I don't know how you kill 5,000 children and then claim you're being careful.
Okay, I know we're sort of running through a lot of the talking points that people hear, but I think it's important.
Yeah.
And if you feel at any point like I'm throwing softballs to you or throwing fastballs, feel free to kind of take us in another direction. What do you make of the claim that Israel, as discriminate as it might want to be, is going to kill civilians because Hamas uses human shields?
Well, that's sort of that's sort of the one of the talking points about of the Israeli talking points is we're bombing terrorist infrastructure. Well, what does that mean? You're talking about one of the highest population densities on Earth. What's terrorist infrastructure? Israel can point to anything, any building, and say, I mean, 60% of the buildings in northern Gaza have been destroyed. What's terrorist infrastructure?
Mm-hmm.
That could be anything, you know. Some Hamas operative set foot in a building. Now it's a command center. Now we're going to bomb it. We're going to level it. I mean, that's what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're heading south, which the Americans are a little touchy about. But they just wanted to kind of just do this Goldilocks kind of. The Americans want to. They don't want this to burn too hot, just hot enough. They want to strike the right temperature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't. Precision methods. I can't even take that seriously.
Hmm.
I mean, parents in Gaza they write their child's name on the child's arm. So if the kid ends up in the hospital unconscious, they can identify the child. Now, children end up in the hospital. They're covered in blood, they're covered in ash, they're covered in concrete dust. I mean, they barely look human. I've seen a lot of the photography. So there's this little kid, like 5 years old, covered in concrete dust and blood. And this happens again and again and again and again. No family comes to claim the kid. Here's this 5-year-old sitting there, traumatized, in pain, and no family comes to claim the kid because they're dead. Because anyone who would claim that child is dead. The whole family is dead. So now that bit of news is going to get shared with the 5-year-old on top of being traumatized and terrorized and whatever other word you want to throw at it. So there they are with their name written on their arm with a marker, and no one's coming to get them because there is no one to come to get them.
Mm.
So when we read about reports like this, and then we hear about Israel's precision methods, it beggars belief. It's just I don't know what to say to that.
You describe the conflict as uncomplicated. I think you're the first person I've ever heard describe it that way.
Because I've read about it.
How can otherwise reasonable and intelligent people, in your view, be so wrong about it then? I mean, I've spoken with intelligent people and they see it completely differently than how you've described it.
Well, intelligence and judgment are two different things. You can be the smartest person. You can have IQ points coming out of your ears, but have terrible judgment or just be uninformed.
Mm-hmm.
It helps to read and study this conflict, about history, about whatever, and then look at what's actually going on. And what's going on in Israel and Palestine is not complicated. I've boiled it down to a book that's about 200 pages long, and I start way before it started. I wanted to dispel the myth that this goes back to the ancient period. So we actually cover the ancient period.
Mm-hmm.
So much of the book covers the period that doesn't even address the conflict. We just did it just to show that here, Here you go. Here's the United Kingdom of Israel. Here's the Canaanite populations. You see, no conflict. You know, we just did it on purpose to definitively show that the conflict doesn't go back that far. So the book's longer than it needs to be.
Mm.
You know, this book could have been a lot shorter, and I could have still crunched the history down into, you know, half the size. You know, that book could have been a lot shorter, and it's already short. So if it was complicated, if it was a complex conflict, then the book would be a lot longer, you know. It's not. That book could be half as long. That'd be plenty of space to run through the historical record, because it's not complicated. The people who are saying it's complicated are wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't know the history, and they're probably covering for someone. There's likely a political motivation there. If you want to present this conflict in this miasma of complexity, then it sounds like there's a political agenda there.
How closely do your views align with what you perceive to be the sort of consensus, if you will, among scholars who study this conflict? Do you diverge in any meaningful ways from them?
Hit me with that again, Ben.
So I'm trying to get a sense of how your views fit in among the kind of broader scholarly literature on this.
Yeah. Well, if you're talking about the scholarly literature, I don't think my views are, if they are indeed views, are much different than what you'd find in the true scholarly literature. We know the facts. We know this conflict has been documented up one side and down the other, and there are very large, heavily footnoted books on the subject. And what they have to say is not terribly different from what I'm saying. And these are very reputable, oftentimes Israeli scholars, Jewish Israeli scholars, in many instances, that are saying things that aren't terribly different from what I'm saying. They're just saying it in very large books. You know, these books are like 700 pages long, and the footnotes are, you know, quite deep. They've done some very serious archival research, and yeah, we know the facts. This isn't mysterious at all.
All right. I think I've exhausted most of my questions. Before I get to my last question, is there anything that you want to touch on? Maybe any history you want to brush over?
I'm trying to think.
Is there something that you think the readers of the Gainesville Times should know about this international conflict?
I think just that. I just think, you know, read books on the subject and bear in mind that it's not complicated. You know, don't go in thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to figure this out. You know, all these smart people have written all these huge books and all this nonsense, you know. You don't need to be a quote unquote smart person to understand this conflict. You don't. And I know people are kind of intimidated, like, oh my God, that's got too many moving parts. You know, all these big books have been written, and then people get intimidated very easily, you know. But I would just say, don't. Just start reading, start turning pages, and you'll quickly find that this conflict is not terribly hard to understand. It's not hard to understand at all. And in the back of my book, I make a bunch of recommendations, pages of recommendations about books that other people can check out, you know, that I have found useful in my work. You know, from the very short to the very long. I'd start there, you know, just look at the suggested reading list on the back of my book. Start there, you know, and start reading about it.
All right, last question for you, Gregory. Really appreciate you taking the time. It's been an interesting chat.
That's all right.
What does the future hold? Do you think that a peaceful settlement of the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict is more or less likely in light of current events?
Sadly, it's perhaps more likely now. It's not a great way to go about it, but I think the actions of Hamas on October 7th put the Palestinian narrative front and center diplomatically. They were being ignored over the course of 2 presidential administrations. Well, you can't ignore them now, So I suspect. I don't know. My crystal ball works about as well as anybody else's, but I think that you're going to see when this whole thing's over, finally, hopefully sooner than later. I think you're going to see some kind of return to negotiations and some kind of robust diplomacy. Now, what form that takes, I don't know, but I suspect that this will put the Palestinians back on the diplomatic agenda. For sure. I can't see a scenario where there isn't some kind of diplomacy, some kind of negotiations going on. They already are going on, not big picture stuff. It's more focused on Gaza, but the Americans, the Israelis, Hamas, Qatar, Egypt, they're all in the same room. So they're already doing it. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility that they just stay in the same room and shift topics. Why not? They're already there, wherever they are, in a hotel room or something. They're already there. So why not? We'll see. I don't know. There's no way of telling what the future holds, what the diplomatic future holds for the conflict. But these parties are already in contact and already conducting diplomacy. But they're conducting diplomacy
to say nothing of kind of the popular sort of uprising that seems to have happened.
What do you mean, Ben?
The sort of protests that have kind of emerged across the world in the United States and other places.
I think that's going to have a huge influence. I think Joe Biden is watching this. Excuse me. The mood has soured in the White House around the administrative staff, the staff of the administration. The mood has soured publicly. Approval for Israel's down. Sympathy for Gaza is up. And people are none too pleased about seeing all these dead kids paraded across their television screens. So I think Joe Biden is kind of sweating this. I also think that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is sweating it. His approval's in the tank. I don't know if he has much of a career left. So, fear for one's career can be a highly motivating factor. So I think that's going to play a role. Yeah, for sure. I can't see it not.
Right.
I think it already is. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll end it there, Gregory. I appreciate you taking the time. You have my cell number, so just
thanks again, Ben. Yeah, stay in contact if you got any questions or whatever. Yeah, let me know.
Okay. All right. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Ben.